because we were talking about how corrupt the Reagan administration was and how corrupt the Nixon administration was and blah, 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 and the Bushes and and the Clintons and whatever. She said, I had a political science teacher that I thought was crazy at the time when he told me that Jimmy Carter was going to be our best president ever. And I started laughing at her and I said, well, all I can tell you is he is the only president that fired almost 1,000 CIA officers. And he did it because of exactly what we're talking about. There was a cancer. The problem, though, for him, bless his heart, was that they didn't actually fire them. They set up a thing called the Enterprise. They embedded at least 50 of those quote unquote fired officers in the DEA. They embedded them in the IRS. People out. And then the ones that they couldn't keep in the federal government, they put in a company called, it was not technically, it wasn't incorporated as the Enterprise. They referred to it as the Enterprise because it was their off the books, black covert operators that they then used on all of these kind of Gladio missions.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Do you, I don't want to say fear, but do you think the United States could get into a position of having a designated survivor and have that scenario play out?
I mean, anything's possible. Do I think that is likely? No.
Like the TV show, Designated Survivor.
Well,
I don't know if she's still talking, but I can't hear her.
Don't think she is.
Okay.
oh, I was. That's
We got a delay there. Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, I didn't hear her. I don't know what she said.
Carol, try the mute button again. No?
She disconnected. All right, well, until we get Carol back up here, I'll take a minute to reset the space.
Hello, this is Becky. Can I ask you a question?
Just 1 second. We'll come right to you. And actually, Jeff was ahead of you. So, or actually, Big Al, raise your hand. Actually, we're calling you in order. And
Yeah. So, I gotta feed our crows more around here, Bill. Mine are young yet. Gotta see what research is feeding them. Let me reset the space real quick here, and then we'll get down to the hands, and I'll be down there, Jeff. I know we gotta get to you. It is Manic Monday, Operation Gladio Part 3. We're joined by Colonel Towner. He's been telling us all about this fascinating subject. We're fun to have you here in Twitterville tonight with me and Bill and Trump Frog, who's joining us on the pod. It's great to have you here. So make sure you guys are sharing that space out so we can walk to the top of the algorithm, and we can dance up the Ethernet and shatter that son of a bitch last day. Go ahead and float that space out, and then we'll repost your quote post. That will really help drive it up there. Again, we appreciate you all being here. We want to get back to the hands and Colonel Towner and our discussion here on Gladio, Part 3. Manic Monday, Bill up. Let's get back down to the hands. I'm going to go to Jeff first, and then we're going to fly on down to Big Al. So, Jeff, what question you got for Colonel? And how you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm doing great, guys. Good evening, Bill, Trump, Drax, Research, and the Colonel, of course. Boy, we just lined up everything to Richard Nixon, who I believe was had to resign because the Central Intelligence set him up, and his position on the war on drugs and other things made the guys get rid of him. And I think that instead of, I mean, God forbid they would have done to him what they did to Bobby and JFK, then I think the American people would just had a fit. That was 3 in 10 years that were eliminated from the position of president. And I think that the intelligence, as the Colonel Towner has put so eloquently, needs to be dissolved. There's no repair for that agency. They're just too in too deep to pull themselves out. And from Mystic all the way through to Gladio, it's all interconnected with these few people at the top making all the decisions, and it's something that is all connected with William Colby being connected to Mystic, and all the different connections, as you said earlier, Colonel. They're all connected, and thanks all that.
So let me just address the Richard Nixon thing. I'm still looking for the actual smoking gun on it. There's no question that the quote unquote Cuban exiles, which were trained Gladio operators under the direction of the Miami station chief to go internationally and do whatever they wanted, was involved in that whole setup. To what end, I think, is still a question mark, but I do want to address the war on drugs, because the war on drugs is not at all what we were led to believe. Nixon's war on drugs was basically a war on the Corsican mafia and taking out the CIA's competition. Richard Nixon, actually, during his presidential run after the end of Eisenhower's administration, which he served the entire 8 years as the vice president for, made a deal with the Japanese government of giving them autonomy over one of those Golden Lily gold funds, which was called Fund M. And in exchange, they gave him a significant amount of money in very roundabout ways in order for him to run for president in the late 1960s. So Nixon was not at all clean. He had significant a significant role in realigning the Corsican mafia drug trade. They basically assassinated all of the Corsican mafia. And he worked in conjunction with the president of France to do it. That gave the CIA complete control of the Golden Triangle drug trade through Sicily. They set up pharmaceutical labs in order to process the cocaine, and they basically mimicked the processing that the Corsican mafia had set up to achieve the level of refinement that they did, because I guess it was the best in the world at the time. So Nixon's war on drugs was not actually a war on drugs. During his war on drugs, the drug coming into the United States went up by 5 times. So that's kind of a misnomer. So he's not all good, he's not all bad, but he definitely was part of this entire apparatus. How he had a falling out with them, I don't know. I'm still trying to chase that down. I've got a lot of information about it, but I don't feel confident enough that I have the final answer. It's like the whole JFK thing comes full circle with Operation Gladio, because I'm now absolutely convinced that there, we actually have the proof of the 2 OAS agents that were part of the French Gladio cell that Otto Skorzeny had trained, that were actually deployed and in Dallas, Texas on the day JFK was shot. So I feel very confident about talking about that. Coup, I don't feel as confident. I do have some things that I'm still got like question marks beside them that I have discovered, but I haven't verified them yet. So I don't want to say for sure that it was a CIA takeout. It may have been some crossed wires, but anyway.
It wasn't Forrest Gump that turned him in.
Who knows?
He was at the Watergate, wasn't he? Forrest Gump. He got him up the door across the street from the Watergate or something. I remember.
Yes, sir. Colonel, one more question. Was that the French connection that was taken down by the CIA?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's the Corsican Mafia. Yeah, and that's what they referred to it as, the French Connection. Yeah.
The French Connection. I said a mini B. All right, let's go down to Big Al. It probably has a question. What's up, Big Al? How you doing tonight?
Drax doing good. Bill, thank you. Colonel Downer, unbelievable show. On your first segment, Colonel, I read something that was so bizarre. I can't believe it. But here's what this guy wrote down. In a U.S. Air Force base in Thailand, there was 57,000 tons of old gold. That gold did not have any stampings on it, nothing. It was just gold bars. Around 2014, right around when Malaysia Airlines went down or went missing, MH370, and it has nothing to do with this, but this author says they took all the gold to Perth to get reassayed and reminted with serial numbers and everything like that in 2014. This was done with 3 jumbo jets that had the stripe of Malaysia Airlines, but it didn't have the M on it. So have you ever heard this? It was in Thailand at an Air Force base.
So,
Oh, yes. Can I jump in here, Colonel?
sure, go ahead.
I heard this whole story next 22. And the sister plane was MH17, which Colonel Tanner was talking about, because they make those in pairs.
Correct.
And
Yes.
that plane had all of the dead bodies that the Ukrainian soldiers said they found on that plane. So they did steal a bunch of gold and flew it down to Perth. That MH370, MH17 is a very cool thing. Go ahead, Colonel. I just want to jump in because I heard that whole thing and it blew me away.
Before Colonel jumps in, just remind you guys tomorrow night, 8 p.m., we'll be joined by Ashton Reports to discuss Malaysia 370, the disappearing plane. They'll be here to discuss that with Bill up over 8 p.m. EST tomorrow night. So speaking of that plane, we'll be discussing it with Ashton Reports tomorrow with Bill Elmore here at 8 p.m. EST.
Sweet, it's worth listening to. I did a space on that topic. I definitely will be in there tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard all of the, what I would say are rumors about that. I have not found anything that's convincing to me that I can put a finger on. And I, only because of the my commitment to Operation Gladio, I try to stay within this ball game until I can tie it to it in order to kind of not lose focus on this. So I'm gonna obviously suggest you watch or listen to the show tomorrow, and hopefully I'll have the opportunity to listen myself. We've done quite a bit of research into 370 only because we did it MH17 and its flight over Ukraine when we were told that it was being shot down by Russia, which is absolutely a lie. There was 3 Air Force officers at the air traffic control station that they, number one, they shut the one down it should have went to. They lowered the aircraft over an active war zone in order for it to be able to be reached in order to shoot it down. So there was just so many anomalies in the MH17 shoot down, all pointing towards Ukraine. It was done right after the 2014, like their coup that they had was in February, and then in July is when the plane was shot down, and they were looking at being able to pin that whole thing on Russia because they were in the middle of trying to do a regime change on Putin way back then. So everything about the MH17 that came out from the U.S. government was a lie.
Gotcha. The other thing I want to say is part of that gold in 2014 might have started some type of a startup company that was called crypto gold. So that's another thing that I read in this book. But it's almost too unbelievable to believe.
Well, I would have said the same thing about Golden Lily. When I was first told about that, I said the exact same thing. I read the Gold Warriors. It's Sterling and Peggy Seagrave did all of the research of it. And there's court cases. It's been unequivocally proven that there were trillions of dollars of gold that Japan in its Pacific sweep of taking over for like 15 years. They made Korea a colony. They took over China. They took over Vietnam. They took over Singapore, Malaysia, all of those. And when they did, they basically just went in there with a vacuum. They took everything. They took all of their old, 1,000-year-old manuscripts, everything, every diamond, every coin, everything. And then they moved it to the Philippines. It was about a 10-to-1 split. They put a bunch of it in the palace in Japan, but then for about every one piece of gold they put there, they put 10 in the Philippines. And they dug these elaborate tunnel systems and then covered it all up. And they did elaborate mapping systems in order to be able to go back and find them. They put sarin gas and glass and like this fine sand that will suffocate you. So if you go and try to dig it out without the specific instructions on how to get to the actual gold, it'll kill you. So there was a lot of planning that went into that. And then they have Marcos, while the CIA basically installed him to get access to all of that gold. And when Marcos got a little too big for his britches, they had to get rid of him too. And then that made him susceptible to a lawsuit that basically proved all of this. So, yeah, it's definitely possible. And then, of course, they use all of that gold to, just like Hitler's gold that was in Switzerland, they use that to basically jumpstart Operation Gladio. They were using that as a fund in order to be able to fund black covert operations till they could get their drug empire set up.
Thanks, Colonel.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, Big Al. Carol, I think you got back in. Did you want to finish your question or your thought before we move on?
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay. A lot of films,
I don't hear her.
You don't hear me? Darn it. Can you hear me now, Colonel?
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you can, I'll have to move to another room. I'm so sorry.
She can.
A lot of films nowadays and in the past appear to be predictive programming.
Right.
The reason I mentioned Designated Survivor, it was astounding when I watched the pilot whereby the Designated Survivor is watching Congress in session with the president, and all of a sudden everything goes blank and everyone was eliminated at once. And I think about these things, and I think about the Sum of All Fears, in which some nefarious operators got rape from the United States, transported it, or it was in a bomb from the 40s, which was buried. They brought it back to the United States. It was detonated, and they said the Russians did it. This sort of play. And I wonder if Baltimore is still in play. That accident in Baltimore bothers me, because part of the film, Sum of All Fears, talks about a nuclear explosion at Baltimore Stadium. All of these things seem predictive. Even some of the cartoons are predictive. And when you go back to a lot of these films, some of these things come true. And I think Hollywood is playing it out ahead of time. And I'm wondering what you feel about stuff like that. It's not fantasy to me. Used to be fantasy, it's not fantasy any longer.
Well, obviously, it's not all true. What they do, it's kind of almost trying to paralyze you with fear. There have been unequivocally movies that have been made that have hints at what they're doing. And, the one that we came across when we were doing Operation Gladio first was the oranges in all of the Godfather trilogy death scenes. And I didn't even remember that they were there. And somebody early on put a post up that said, "Did you ever figure out what the oranges were about?" And I'm like, "What oranges are you talking about?" And they're like, "Well, they're in all of the death scenes in Godfather. I just don't know why." So, months go by and I'm reading one of these books, and the author was very descriptive about this whole drug network, and they actually were busted once they moved the drug operation down to Sicily from the Corsican mafia in France. They began loading that refined heroin inside of plastic oranges in crates that were shipped from Sicily into the United States. And I was like, I told Bridget and Cousin Ed, "Oh my God, I found out the orange thing." Because those kind of things kind of sit in the back of my head, waiting to be solved. And so there's no doubt what you're saying is true. The problem is they will make 10 movies and only one of them are going to be true. And it's only true if they're allowed to succeed with their plan. Because just as one of my favorite sayings is, the enemy always gets a vote. Well, we're obviously their enemy, and we get a vote. And so just because they make a movie that they intend to carry out doesn't mean that they will be able to do that. So I don't spend any amount of my time during the day. I don't even watch movies, quite frankly. I haven't watched a movie in the last 10 years because I kind of have made the commitment myself. Number one, I'm not going to give them my money. But number two, I believe we all get to have a choice in the end state. And I do believe, I trust in God, and I do pray a lot. That whatever's going to happen is going to be His will. And that's kind of the thing that keeps me going every day.
I've heard it put, some people believe that these elites, these evil people who don't care if they're killing people or whatnot, that they are part of a religion, and they strongly believe in karma, right? So they do project, they do put it out there. Not only in movies, but just listen to the WEF. They'll tell you right up front what their plan is, what they want to do, right? And that's part of a karmic belief that, hey, we told you what we were going to do. If you fall victim to it, that's on you. It doesn't come back to us. So I've heard that kind of perspective before, but just my 2 cents.
Right. Yeah. And I've heard that as well. I can only control what's within my span of control. So I don't spend any time worrying about the bigger picture. I'm trying to give people the tools to know what's out there, so that when these things do play out, people don't freak out. They can understand what's happening, because one of the biggest ways they get us to respond is to emotion. And if you understand what they're doing, they can't get to your emotions. You now have control of them because you understand your environment. And one of the things they talk to you in being in the military about is, when you go into an unknown situation, you have to have basically an extensive amount of training to be able to control your emotions and walk through what you know to be the step 1 through 10 of the next thing that has to happen. your emotions can play no part in your response. And that has to be the way, and the only way we can do that in this environment is with knowledge. So we're going to understand the environment that we're operating in. And as a result, we're going to be able to respond in a completely different way that does not allow our emotions to dictate that response.
Absolutely, and researchers have said this in our MK Ultra spaces as well. You know, when you're awake and when you are aware of their tactics and what they're doing, and like you just said, you know, this is a war. You know, nobody makes good decisions through fear, right? And panic. So you got to stay calm. Researcher, I'll let you put it the way you put it because you speak this language a lot better than me.
Hey, Bill. Hey, Trax. Hey, Trump Frank. This has been a very, very entertaining and informative discussion, Colonel. It's a pleasure to speak with you once again, and thank you so much for delivering so much information. You know, on the fear-based programming, I'll say this. You know, it's weaponized fear, right? To essentially, once they put you in that fear state, as you're saying, Bill, your emotions, your judgment is clouded. Let's give you an example, right? You know, I heard somebody talk about weaponizing love, and in a sense, I do agree. So let me give you the example they brought up. And during the COVID situation, they told people, you know, you have to do this for your grandma, do this for your grandpa. Don't you want to protect them, right? You know, so it's all about this emotional manipulation. And you know, if people are fearful, right, that you know something will happen to their grandparents based on what that person said, they can be influenced, right? Their mental state can be influenced. So what Colonel Towner is talking about with all these movies and you know the deception and you know the stimuli that you're putting yourself in front of, you have to really know what's going on, right? So I can understand not watching these things. I pretty much only watch documentaries myself. So, but Colonel, I had a few questions for you on the topic of Gladio. The situation with the French Connection, the Corsican Mafia. I was curious, did Jean-Pierre Lafitte, the assassin, did his name come up in your research?
Yes.
Okay, wow. And you brought up Golf Whitlam. What was the connection between him and Michael John Hand and Francis Nugent? Was there a direct or indirect connection?
With who? I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Golf Whitlam. You mentioned him. I think it was in the earlier section. Something about him being ousted.
Hold on.
Is that the Prime Minister in Australia?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, so basically what they were saying is that he was more reform minded and that the CIA was they basically did like what they did in Italy in 1948. They were funding misinformation and disinformation to basically get rid of him.
Well, just to kind of follow up on that, do you know why there was such a need to get rid of him at the time? Because you know I've heard his name come up, and some other researchers have mentioned that even the Queen of England at the time played a hand in removing him. So it seemed to have been some really high level stuff, possibly related to Pine Gap. I think I'm not sure, but you know that's basically what my research is indicating.
Well, keep in mind that all of this goes back to both London and MI6 and the CIA, which means then London and DC. So this entire operation is basically ran out of those two offices. It's done under NATO, but more of a NATO coordination for what those two entities want. You know, and again, in our very first segment, we talked about how this entire arrangement of realigning the world and trying to install basically a single fascist overlord in the form of like the British Round Table concept that came out of the Fabian Society is where all of this goes back to. So anytime that they have, like Allende in Chile, anytime that they have a president that is not going to play ball with them and they use a platform to campaign on, just like Trump did, about returning the power to the people, they will be taken out. They will do it either on the campaign side so that you don't get elected, or they will do it afterwards in a soft or hard coup. And a lot of times they actually are so bold that they will approach the person and try to bribe them out of office. They did it to the Haitian president. You can have X amount of money and walk away. If they choose not to walk away, they will try to kill him.
Well, let me just say thank you so much, Colonel, for leading this discussion and delivering this information as it relates to Gladio. And thank you so much for answering my questions. I'm going to drop the mic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, researcher. Yeah. Question probably for Colonel Thompson coming in. We hope so. Miles Dean, what's going on?
Good evening, Colonel.
Hi.
Don't forget your husband's little coinkydink. Get smart.
Yeah, so for anybody that's new, I may have said this in our first session, but it is apropos since we were talking about Hollywood. My husband obviously is kind of my crutch through all of this because, as you might imagine, having spent 30 years in the military and finding out all of this new information has kind of been overwhelming at some point. And so he's kind of like my partner in this whole discovery thing. And so one day, and he's a very kind of precise person, he came in one day and he said, hey, do you remember that show we used to watch called Get Smart? And I'm like, yes, but what's that got to do with Operation Gladio? And he goes, well, do you remember what the two entities were called? And I said, no. And he said, chaos and control. And control was the good guys and chaos were the bad guys. And that literally is a depiction of the strategy of tension, where they will purposely create chaos in order to implement their control. And that is, in a nutshell, what Operation Gladio is. They will create international terror events. They will create domestic terror events. Doesn't matter. There's not a limitation on dead bodies. They don't really give a shit whether it's 1 million, 100,000, tens of thousands will die in the chaos that they create. And it is all to implement their version of control, which eventually leads to one world government.
Okay, I'm not sure if he,
That's what I'm looking.
yeah, I think he might have dropped. I want to go over to Sally because she's part of our team, and then we'll go down to Kent.
I'll make this super quick. Researcher, I don't know if I DM'd you a link that Colonel Towner had, or not a link, yeah, a link to a thread that she'd done that had the feed in it when you were doing MK Ultra on Saturday night. So go look in there for it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Kent, how are you doing tonight?
Yeah, good, Bill. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the mic. My sort of area has always been on the private corporation side of things, working with governments and the military in different areas for exploration. I'll just say this from first-hand experience. When we talk about the CIA or agencies, whether it's the CIA or another government, getting involved in private corporations that has implications for the world. Personally, myself, on 2 separate occasions, have actually been directly instructed by a certain State Department to do things that would affect, country level incidents. And the point I want to make is this: what concerns me is not that America or any other government gets involved in other countries, which is a real concern for me, is that a lot of this stuff is being done without any oversight, without any regulation, without any foresight for what the implications could be down the road. And I can tell you this, folks, what the concern for me is not the government. It's no breaking news that the CIA gets involved in trying to upturn governments. Gough Whitlam was the only Prime Minister in Australian history to be removed by the Governor General. The Governor General is the Queen's representative in Australia. And you've got to think about it. One of the reasons why he was in the ship was because Pine Gap is our biggest secret facility there. Sorry about the tractors, folks. And the strange thing is that there are sections of Pine Gap that the Australian government doesn't have access to. And there was almost a very big incident quite a few years ago because the Australian government said, hey, hang on a sec, we don't really give a shit what you think. This is our country and we want access to all of our facility. I'll say this much, they still don't. But, folks, something we should really, as citizens of any country, be really aware of is that our governments, the agencies, whoever does it, whether it's the State Department or someone else, are being directly involved in commercial interests, pipelines, oil and gas research in such a way that if they don't want it to happen in a certain country, and I don't want to say too much, but there was a certain European pipeline that was cancelled 14 years ago, a multi-billion-dollar pipeline that was cancelled because one country that was going to be connected to was out of favour with a certain other country. And the implications of that have actually increased the tension between Russia and the rest of the world to this day. And we don't have that other avenue for heating Europe and supplying fuel to Europe because that decision was made 14 years ago, and it was only made because they didn't like that country. You know what I mean?
Correct. And you find that those types of political considerations you find that this international syndicate basically is ruling the governments. They decide who sits in the government and who doesn't sit in the government. And that is very disconcerting to figure that part of this out. But to go along with what you're saying, and as another illustration, is I just recently found out that the guy that harbored or gave safe haven to Lee Harvey Oswald's wife was what people referred to as a white Russian. His name was George Morgenschild, however you pronounce his last name, originally from Russia. What I didn't know was his dad was connected to the Baku oil fields in Azerbaijan. And his dad, when this guy was 12 or 13, was dealing directly with Alan Dulles in Azerbaijan because Alan Dulles represented Standard Oil, who bought the oil field. So Alan Dulles has known this George Morgenschild guy his whole life. And the irony, if you will, the small world little spectrum, is that during the Chechnya Operation Gladio, where the CIA was piping in Mujahideen and Al-Qaeda trained operatives from Afghanistan to be a pain in the ass to Putin. During that entire operation where they were killing people, the pipeline was rerouted, leaving Russia out of it. And a lot of people don't know that. And when you go back in time and you look at the fact that after the CIA arranged for assassins to come take out our president in November 1963, you have the cover-up of Allen Dulles, who had been fired by JFK, being the only real full-time guy on the Warren Commission, basically running the commission, and their star witness is George Morgenshield, who Allen Dulles has known his entire life. How's that happen? Unless it's all planned and all coordinated. That's dumbfounding to me. And that to me is why I find Operation Gladio so fascinating. Because the more you research it, the smaller that circle gets.
Absolutely. I'm still kind of grasping that Get Smart thing. I'm gonna look that up and watch it again tonight. Hey, Becky, I know you had a question for the Colonel.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Yeah, I just have a quick question. So, have you just learned all this stuff recently, or did you know it from your time in the Air Force and you've just recently been allowed to start talking about it?
So, definitely not the last, but I do want to explain something. I know a lot of stuff. I went to school my whole adult life. I have 6 different degrees in all kinds of different fields. I have a construction management degree. I have a business degree. I have an MBA. I have a strategic studies master's degree from Air War College. So I'm an avid reader. So this has been a passion of mine. I've never read fiction. I only read nonfiction, basically my whole adult life. So I have a lot of information running around in my head. I didn't ever have what I refer to as a skeleton to kind of hang it all on to make it make sense. When I started a year ago looking into, I just happened to read a book that basically was Joseph Farrell's The Third Way book, which talks about how you have the Bolshevik Revolution on one hand and the Nazi on the other hand, and we were taught or programmed to believe that was left and right, and those were cattle prods to push us to a middle and then push us forward as a global society to get on a train to our own death. And that kind of is that's my analogy of what he was saying in that book. And basically, he talks about a thing called the Madrid Circular that was written in 1950 that basically outlines this. It was like the continuation, as if the fascists did not lose World War II. They basically took an overt war and converted it over to a covert war, and that we're still in that same war today. And they basically outlined how they were going to roll around the world, install fascist dictators, which is exactly what NATO and the CIA was doing as part of Operation Gladio. And then once all of the fascist dictators were installed, they'd all line up in this kind of pan-America, pan-Europe, pan-Asia kind of formation, form this hierarchy that's a round table where they're in control at the top, and we're going to be their slaves. And basically, they'll do things like COVID and get rid of millions of us at a time. And so that's kind of what's laid out in this thing called the Madrid Circular. And I thought that was totally weird that somebody would articulate something like that. And at the end of the book, it said something about one of the ways that they were going to do it is these things called stay behind units, which I had never heard that term. Now, for me to have been in the military for 30 years and have a master's degree in military operations, it is kind of unusual, not unheard of, but unusual for something that appeared to be such a big military concept for me not to have at least heard about it. So I was inquisitive, and I began looking into that thing called stay behind units. And as soon as you do the first search, your mind blows up. And then stay behind units basically is Operation Gladio. And then it just started rolling downhill. And most of, I would say probably about 50% of the information I already knew, but I didn't have a place to put it on the skeleton. Operation Gladio gave me that wagon wheel, or, you know, like a full grown skeleton, where I now know where to put everything that I have already in my arsenal, plus all of the new information as we find it. I have a place to put it, because now I know all of the different components of it. So I can now, I've got that picture in my head, I can now articulate it in a completely coherent way to make it make sense for everybody else.
Well, that's great. This is fascinating. So I appreciate the answer. I was just curious if it was tied in at all with this great awakening we're all going through.
Well, it does, because in many ways, this is our hidden history. It ties directly into us all waking up to what the real world is all about. And one thing that our Spaces at Noon has taught me is, because it is a global effort, we have people, like we had a lady cry the other day. She had a dad that lives in Costa Rica who has friends in Nicaragua, and she was crying tears of joy that finally people in America, she found someone who knows what we have put them through. She finally found someone who she can count on to tell the rest of America what the hell we've been doing to the rest of the world, because they all know it, because we did it to them. And they keep, there's people around the world going, what the F is wrong with you Americans that you don't know what your own stinking government's doing? And so we, Bridget and Cousin It and I, afterwards, you know, we had to get on the phone with each other and go, this is exactly why we're doing what we're doing. This is it. Because we've had people from Cuba, we've had people from Spain, we've had people from Sweden, we've had people from all over the world going, finally, someone's actually telling the rest of America what the hell's going on.
Excellent, thanks. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, go back to Kent.
Yeah, hi, Colonel. It's very interesting talking to you. Just so you sort of understand a little bit of my background. I was working in Pakistan in 2001. My chief of security used to train the whack and hut guys for Afghanistan, so you know I've had a bit of an insight. Yeah. But the concern for me, and I'm not American, so I have no meat in the game, but the concern for me is the decision-making processes. What I've found is that there seems to be, at a certain level, whether it's military or the corporations that are involved with them, there seems to be very little scrutiny of the decision-making processes. So I understand the need for security, I understand the need for secrecy to a certain degree. What I sort of don't, maybe you could, the question I have for you, Colonel, is, do you think, in your opinion, having an insight into the bad things, the nefarious things that are done, do you think that your Congress and the citizens in general have any mechanism that would provide them with a mechanism to scrutinize the decision-making processes when they're making all these interferences in other countries? I just wonder what you thought of that.
So first of all, I don't think most of Americans understood the extent to which we interfere, number one. And because the way they sell it here is we're helping the good guys, just like with the Contras. You had President Reagan the entire time, and people just absolutely fell all over themselves over him. He's the best president, blah, blah, blah. the entire 8 years that he was president, he lied to the American people, telling us that the Contras were the good people and the Sandinistas were communists. And that's a bold-faced lie. The Contras were terrorists, and the Sandinista government was a duly elected government that we should have been supporting. And the only reason we didn't is because of United Fruit and that bullshit. So the entire American public has been lied to. So you can't hold a government accountable when that government refuses to tell the people the truth, number one. Number two, I think COVID changed everything. The American people, both with our military and our government, have always believed them to be benevolent because we've been freaking lied to our entire lives. But COVID changed everything. There's not a person that I know in my entire life, extended family, at any meeting that I go to, and I don't just go to Patriot meetings, that trust their government in any way, shape, or form after COVID. Everybody understands our government is out of control. They're liars. And they, in many ways, have been the terrorists that they accuse us of being. So, you know, just the most recent thing of the FBI or whoever it was, the DEA, that went in and broke the guy's door down and shot him dead, that was the airport manager. That's still not dead. People now know that. In the past, it was like, well, you know, the FBI can't be that bad. January 6th changed everything with that. We now know the FBI are the terrorists. They are the Phoenix program that we implemented in Vietnam to assassinate people. That's now the FBI. The FBI has internalized the Phoenix program and brought it home to America. And I believe there's cadres within local police departments, like those 5 officers that was in Memphis chasing that little kid down that was screaming for his mom. Those are Satanists. Those are people that are participating in something to disrupt our entire society. And so now I think people, and it may be the only good thing that came out of COVID, but it has woken up everybody in America that our government, and no, not everybody, I know there's still dumbasses with masks, but let me just say 90% of the people no longer trust their government, and everything now gets questioned. And the good news for me is, just like with the Crocus attack on Russia, it was not 24 hours before everybody in America was on Spaces, and we did our podcast. That's a Gladio event. That absolutely is bullshit. That's something the CIA did. Their misinformation can't even last 24 hours now. The shoot down of that one rocket that landed in Poland. Nope, within 24 hours, we had the serial number. Everybody knew that was Ukraine after they blamed Russia. Same thing with the pipeline. They can't get away with it anymore. And I do believe that's the reason why they're acting more and more desperate, is because they don't have total control of the narrative anymore with Elon Musk buying Twitter. And I don't care what you think about him, but having a place like this that we can all meet and have these discussions is everything. It's not some little sideline gab, or, I mean, I love True Social too, but it's not there where only you're in an echo chamber. This is where everybody is, and you're allowed to have conversations about this stuff and share it with everybody, and you can reach people all over the world. So to me, the entire game changed after 2020.
I agree with you, and I've said this multiple times on Spaces. Drax will say that there's been an awakening for a long period of time, but COVID kind of put it on adrenaline because people got locked down. They started questioning things. Things weren't making sense. They started doing their own research, had lots of time on their hands. They, as much as we were locked down, they got out into nature again, right? And started, there has definitely been a huge awakening. And we don't trust the government. We don't trust our doctors anymore. It's really a shame. But yeah, I'll just say amen to that. Kent, I
Well,
think I've heard it.
And
No,
think
go ahead.
about our diets, everything. We know that they're poisoning us with fluoride. We know all of this stuff has come out because now we question everything.
Absolutely. And a lot of people did that too, right? They weren't sure because of the supply chains and everything else. It's happened in a really interesting way, right? It's not so much everybody decided I'm going to be healthy. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to buy food. Can't even get toilet paper, right? So I'm going to plant a garden. I'm going to raise chickens. I'm going to, right, and start eating food that's not polluted with all the stuff that they've done with this processed food. Yeah, absolutely love it. Kent, I see you, have your hand up, Kent. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment, Bill. This is one of the things I find really frustrating. It might sound naive, but I hate it to sound naive because I think it's important. We face a world where our governments no longer act in our best interest. You don't need to be an Einstein, you don't need to be a political or a military analyst to see that what's going on in the world, when we start ignoring human rights, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, we are literally ignoring the Geneva Convention, human rights, all forms of rationale that we have used since the last two world wars to try and have some sort of sensibility to the world. I mentioned to the Colonel before about my chief in Pakistan. The things that he, because him and I become good friends, the things that he told me about, the decisions that have been made in the past that he'd been involved in, shattered me. It shattered me because I'd actually run for Parliament back in Australia in '98 as an independent to try and improve the system by the people, for Australia. I didn't get anywhere, but that's what I believed in. And when he was telling me these things, the governments are doing these things all around the world, and there's literally no oversight. And quite often these decisions are being made by people who literally have no responsibility for their actions. That's the concern for me. Whether people believe in secrecy or not, whether they believe it's national security or not, in your government, whether it's America, Australia, or where I live, your government should have transparency about the decision-making processes that affect your government and affect your people. And you just don't have it. For me, that is the single biggest point that we're missing these days, is that the people of every country have lost the ability to hold their government accountable for what it does. And for me, that's the most nefarious part of all this.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Let's head on down to Jeff before we head to the next section. So Jeff, what do you got to say? And I'll reset the space and we'll fly into the next section here. What's going on, Jeff?
I'm done with my part. We're just.
Oh, you're good?
Answer.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're not a question. All right, so I'll just head down to Jeff real quick and I'll reach out and jump over to Jeff. Jeff, what's up?
Colonel, I just wanted to reiterate what you had just said about these spaces being opened up for all of us to come on the podcast with Bill and Drax and Trump. And I was talking to Mike Benz last night, and I'd asked him, because he was in London yesterday and he was having a podcast, and I asked him, because the question was floating around about Julian Assange and last night. So I asked him his opinion on what was going on with that case. And he said that he had heard that there was some type of deal trying to be worked out to get him out last night. And then another podcaster popped in and asked some really serious questions about why he was there with no charges. And then all of a sudden today, he's been not exonerated, of course, because he's been in prison and asylum for 13 years straight. And I just can't help but to think that these spaces here might have helped his word get out. And I just wanted to bring that together, that these spaces are very important, as you say, Colonel. And thanks, Bill, for letting me have a word. And I'll wait.
Well, you can definitely bet that the people of that the NSA and the CIA monitor these, and that they have to understand that, and I'm not saying it's going to change their behavior, because some of them are so deep in they can't change. They're going down no matter what. Their choice at this point is to go down fighting, or be locked away in a cell for the rest of their life. So each of them will make their own decision, but I do believe us having these open conversations worldwide is going to change everything.
Copy that. Thank you, Colonel. Really appreciate you. I was thinking about Hillary Clinton in Libya when you were discussing Gaddafi and how they assassinated Gaddafi, and what Hillary Clinton's role in that was very, very extensive. She slept through the gentleman being assassinated at the embassy while she was sleeping. They needed our help. And I just find the whole thing appalling and despicable, and just covered up two-tier justice system not working for us.
Yep, I agree.
I don't want to end up in a Shawshank Redemption situation here with Bill, so we're all good. We'll be fine. Let's keep powering through it, guys. All right, let me head on down. One of my co-hosts here. I'm gonna always go with my co-host first, and we'll head down to Ken from Prague. What's up?
Yeah, that Hillary saying that she was asleep during when it went down doesn't cover the fact that Obama White House watched it unfold on televisions as it happened. And they did it to cover up for SEAL Team 6 and the missiles that were connected to those being shot down. That was a really big deal, obviously, and then stealing Gaddafi's wealth. The president of France went to jail for it, just waiting for Hillary's turn to go to jail for that. And all those people that believe in Operation Trust need to circle back to the Q post that says ETA June for Julian Assange and mentions him specifically. Today's June 24th, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
It's
All day
interesting
long.
how all of this stuff is unwinding, and there's still a group of these these Operation Trust fags running around trying to blackpill in spaces that can't come up with any proof. But man, in the last 6 months, we've just seen a cascade of truths and stuff unfolding. So I think people should be optimistic. I mean, obviously, got to be solution driven, but there's so many things going in the right direction. I mean, they're going to pull Biden out of this race really soon. He will be pulled out. Who knows how they're going to shuffle the deck, but they can't use him. It should be interesting on Thursday. I pray that everybody watches that debate, come up with your own opinions and your own assessments, but it should be very interesting the way they're handcuffing him and turning off the mics. There's nobody in the audience, so Biden doesn't get confused and glitch like a robot. So it should be interesting. Anyway,
Yeah,
wanted to point that out.
Are we even sure it's going to be him, or are they bringing in the wax statue from Disneyland to do the job?
Well, we know somebody's been wearing a mask because we've seen 7 different Bidens, and if people don't think masks are real, you can go find them. They used them. A lady went into Bush Senior's office and had been working in their office and wearing a mask, and they had no idea. And you're talking back in, 88 to 92? So
You're talking
sure
like real masks stuff. You're talking advanced masks. I'm surprised they don't come out with an N95 one just to keep supporting his image. Or that M1 for COVID. He just replaced the back one, right? I mean, just come on out wearing it. There it is. Remember these? They'll be back. All right, we got Kent down there. Let me get to Kent. What's up, brother?
Yeah, no, I just, I didn't have too much to contribute. All I wanted to say was I think these discussions, like you said, are really, really important. I've been on spaces, since they started. I do mainly UAP and UFO stuff, but, the thing that does concern me a little bit is that I've noticed that there's active intervention in spaces. Some of the more, not so much the bigger ones like these, where people are just having a proper discussion, but there's been a lot of interference. There was an article posted about it today in Twitter that you can look up. The point I want to make is this, that influencing the public opinion is one of the biggest jobs of the agencies. They are very, very good at it. You are being put in the position as a citizenry where purely on economic grounds, you now think that China is your biggest, enemy and Russia is your biggest enemy. And the concern for me is that these are not military opinions, these are economic opinions. I read the 2010 CIA PSYOPs manual, and it was sent to me. And the biggest concern for me was when it was constantly referring to commercial advantages. So you have a secret agency of the most powerful government on the planet seeking to use their apparatus to gain commercial advantage over other countries.
Yeah.
I don't know how many citizens actually realize that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the whole reason why I coined that phrase, international syndicate, because that's exactly what they do. It is not a matter of, you know, hey, we don't like your government. Let us try to, in some economic way, be better than our competitors to try to coerce you into doing it our way. It's not that at all. It's do it our way or we're going to come whack you. I mean, they mined the Nicaraguan harbor when they refused to give United Fruit Company back their land. They actually had U.S. military SEAL teams go into the harbor of a foreign country and mine it so that they couldn't get anything in or out until they acquiesced to the demands of the CIA and the State Department and United Fruit. So this has been going on for a very long time, and it all has to be exposed.
Absolutely. I had gotten a question in the DMs, and actually I see Jabber came up on stage, of, you know, where do I find parts 1 and part 2? All my spaces are recorded, and I save the entire space with all the contributions from the comment section and everything in my highlights tab. I did put parts 1 and 2 down in the purple pill, so you can find that there, so you don't have to go search for it in my highlights tab. But yeah, I save all of those so that people can get, you know, people share a lot of stuff in the comments, so I appreciate that. Jabbar, go ahead. Glad to see you on stage.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Top of the world, everybody. New York, the next third world country about to begin. And about to start the movie Escape from New York 3.5. Subtitle, The Neighbors is Leaving.
And like a tutorial.
Well, they had part 1 and 2. I'm about to bring out 3 if it gets any worse than what it is.
To New York.
Don't tell nobody. Somebody spoke about replacing Biden and stuff, and who they might replace Biden with, and I was just about to destroy my notes that I had gotten from one of my peoples that had went to a Democratic fundraiser for Gavin Newsom, and they stated to me that Gavin was being groomed by the Democratic Party, and they're going to nominate him for pres. Now, Camel Toes, which is Kamala, is going to be the governor of California when Newsom vacates to run for the White House. This will be announced and made known to the country by June or July 4th. And it's strange how this is the same time period when the British government comes back and votes for their government, because their government hasn't been together since the ending of May. And I find that rather strange too, plus all the training exercises that's been going on that side. I'm gonna land the plane right there, but thank you very much, Colonel, and my salutes to you for your service to this country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up, Jabbar. Really appreciate that. And I appreciate the humor too. Sally, what you got for us?
I just have a quick question for Colonel, and if you don't have an answer tonight, that's fine, because I know it's getting past the witching hour for you. Have you heard of a Ghislaine Boddington? She was a faculty of arts and science, Old Royal Navy College, that's where she went. Old Royal Navy College, University of Greenwich, Park Row. I've been trying to find things about her, and I'm having a hard time. I've even been using archive.org, but if you haven't, that's okay.
What's her name? I didn't understand.
It's Ghislaine, so Ghislaine. The last name is Boddington, Boddington.
No, I haven't come across her yet.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Jabba, you raised your hand quick there. Do you know that name? Not the Jeffrey Epstein one, I don't think, but go ahead.
Okay, I almost forgot to tell you. China canceled their orders and stuff like to buy wheat and beef due to a toxic called ractopamine, Ractopamine. I don't know nothing about that, so if anybody got a chemistry background in that, they could give me some insight on it. Thank you very much.
Don't eat it. That's my chemistry. Just don't eat it.
Agreed.
Kent, back to you. And we're going to wrap up at the top of the hour, guys. So if you had a question for the Colonel and you haven't asked it, grab a mic. Come on up. But go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, I'll direct it to the Colonel. You know, I have a lot of respect for the military. All my family are military except me. My father, Black Watch, and da-da-da. The question I have for the Colonel, do you believe that, I mean, you're a Colonel, so you've been at a high level, you've seen some sensitive stuff. Do you believe that, regards, these types of covert programs, which relates a little bit to my field, UAP, do you think we'll reach a stage where the actual decision makers, the people who are making the decisions from the military standpoint, engaging contractors, doing special operations, will we reach a point where they can justify the decision-making process to the Congress? Because at the moment, what it appears from an outsider's point of view is the issue is not that people don't know about it. People know about these special programs. The issue seems to be that there seems to be an understanding that even the president doesn't have the right to have access to all these programs. So my sort of question is, under the premise that whether or not you like the president's a different story, I'm talking about the position. If the commander-in-chief of the entire armed forces of the biggest nation on the planet militarily doesn't have access to these programs, how can that be a clinically democratic process? How can that be done? And do you think that needs to change?
Well, there's not supposed to be any program that the president doesn't have access to, number one. So technically he has access to all of them. The question would be whether people are being honest with him about what all they are doing. Now, I use one example where I know unequivocally that there's no way JFK knew about Operation Gladio, or he would never have moved Lyman Lemonsker, who wanted to blow up American cities under Operation Northwood to justify an invasion into Cuba, would have moved him to NATO commander if he'd have known that Operation Gladio was being ran out of NATO, but he did. And less than a year later, he was dead. So that all of that is information that was purposely withheld from him by the CIA. So there is a certain level of trust that you have to have in your government when you become the chief executive officer. I mean, it'd be like going into, I don't know, like Boeing and being the CEO and having a former subsidiary portion of your company that is now branched off to be its own company, sourcing some inferior metal into your aircraft and not telling you, and then shit happens to your aircraft. Well, if you were never told that they were doing that, then there's no way that you will know, obviously, that it's being done. So I think that's why a lot of this, I mean, you can look at it two ways. we had to all see what was being done in our name, whether it was COVID or what they did to Trump with the fake phone calls and the cheating and all that other stuff, in order to be able to have the wherewithal to make the changes once Trump gets reelected and starts making some drastical changes. Because otherwise you lose the entire country, because the country won't have the will to stand behind Trump for the changes to be made. So I view this kind of as the Great Awakening, in which people will now have the ability to see how bad it has been in order to have the will to make the changes that are necessary. So number one, the president does have access. He does have to have some level of trust that his staff is going to, but we know that didn't happen. We know that didn't happen with January 6th, blah, blah, blah. The military has a very interesting legal, because this is the way Congress wrote the law. When they set up the CIA was not allowed to have its own Air Force. It wasn't allowed to have its own Navy. It was required to give those requirements, and there's actually an office on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They had to give those requirements to the military in order to source them. So there was almost some type of second eyes being placed on a lot of this. Unfortunately, over time, the CIA in many cases has actually infiltrated the military too. Just like you saw all of these general officers, whether they were retired or not, embedded in CIA operations. There has been, over the course of the last 70 years, the CIA has infiltrated everything. There are people like General Singleb was never actually a U.S. military officer. He was 100% CIA. Many of them have been posing as military officers. They've been placed in positions of significant responsibility. If you take General Lyman Lemonsker, he comes up in several different roles, from the creation of the OSS and his role in funding it through the military. There's all kinds of different aspects of his career that's just very fishy. So we are required by law to give them a ride to wherever they go when they need military airlift. We're required to provide sea lift capability to them. So the way it was envisioned is that if they're doing something immoral or illegal, that somebody's going to go, I'm not doing that shit. But unfortunately, that hasn't worked out as well as some people thought it would.
I want to go down to Jeff, then we're going to go back to Kent, and then we're going to wrap the space up, guys. This has been a great discussion. While I got the mic, I just want to always thank my co-host Drax. Thank Trump Frog for jumping in with us tonight. Sally, who always supports us and streams us into Rumble, and obviously the Colonel. Man, this is so informative. I appreciate the time. She's given us 3 hours tonight, guys, and she does spaces on this topic all through the week, all through the clock. So I really appreciate you, Colonel. Jeff, what you got for us?
Well, I just was a little bit sidetracked. I was saying a prayer for the Colonel. When she said earlier that was she worried about everything that's going on and her safety, and she just said she leaves it up to the Lord, and I said a prayer that really keeps me so focused on what we're working on here, guys. The one question I did have that I was thinking about was, would you consider it a criminal? Would it be considered criminal in the Geneva Convention to have the biolabs in Wuhan and in Ukraine? Are they considered criminal behavior in the Geneva Convention?
It depends on what they're using them for. If they actually did release, as we know some of the paper or the documents that they took down after it was exposed that it was on the embassy website in Ukraine, that they were doing experiments on infecting fleas of different kinds with viruses, with the expectation, not unlike the ticks and Lyme disease, and that there was some genetic testing going on. If they purposely, with the intention of harm, released biological weapons, that absolutely is a violation of the Geneva Convention. You would have to have the proof that that is what happened. I do find it interesting, as many of people have noted, that the initial bombing campaign for the special military operation did coincide, if you overlaid the map of where the bioweapons labs were, to a very close pattern with where the initial bombing campaigns occurred. So we are also told that the Russian military did gather documentation out of various labs there. So I don't know what's ever going to come of that, whether it's something that they will deal with offline as some arrangement that will be reached. But yeah, it's definitely a violation of the Geneva Convention and the laws of armed conflict.
Dr. Fauci is such a criminal. My aunt, who just retired 50 years in the medical community, loves Dr. Fauci, and I just sat there and I bit my lip. And I know that there's a lot of doctors that backed him because they want to back their own kind. But wow, yeah, thanks, Colonel. Appreciate that.
Sure.
You're also going to back somebody because your income and your status depends on it. There's a bunch of people that didn't back him that were forced to back him because it's fraternal. But we shall soon see what happens with that little creep that gave a bunch of people in Africa AIDS. So we'll find out.
Well, all right, so back on to our presentation. The audience, check out Stanford. We're out of here. So what do you got?
Yeah, I'll just keep a brief question for the Colonel. Just in the UAP community, I don't want to detract. It's just important for me. They often say to us that the president doesn't need to know, and I just, if you wouldn't mind confirming for me and maybe for the audience, I was always under the understanding that the president, by proxy of the position, would have the right to have access to any program being done by any member of the government. So yeah, I just wondered if you could confirm that should the president want to, he should be able to demand access to any special access program that the government is involved in. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, thank you. No, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
He has the highest level clearance there is in the government. And he is in charge of the executive branch in which all of those programs are carried out. So he does have access. There is no one in the United States that can tell the president of the United States he doesn't have a need to know.
That's really refreshing to hear. Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
And before you wrap up, Kent, if you look up top, Cat the Great found the National Presidential Security Memo 32. Right before Trump left office, he signed a bunch of them along with Executive Order 13961. Well, she found those documents. There are special access programs that the current president doesn't have access to that are hidden from him, and I believe that was part of the Mar-a-Lago raid. But if you look up top, Cat the Great found the sauce on those memos that were signed right when Trump left, days before he left. I don't think our commander-in-chief is the same person that we're seeing, but that's just me. And these documents that she found kind of leads us down that path, so I would take a look.
Yeah, just a quick note. As a non-American like folks, I know there's a great divide in your country between the belief systems, but I in my heart, I hope you guys get. I really worry a bit about what's going to happen in your election, and and that worries me a bit as well. A lot of people see so much promise in America's potential, and to see the country so divided at such a critical point in your future, I just hope it goes well. I hope there's not a big problem if, you know, no matter which way it goes. I hope in my heart that you guys get through it, and I hope it doesn't turn into something bad. Just a closing thought, that's all.
Okay, with that, again, I thank you, Carl, for your time again tonight. This is part 3. You can find part 1 and 2 in the bubble and on my highlights tab. Drax, Colonel, I'll give you the last word, and then Drax will take us out.
Well, I just really appreciate everybody being here, and spending the evening with us, and at just our, and again, I appreciate everybody being here.
It's going to be Truth Tuesday, what happened to Malaysia 370 with Ashton Forbes. Ashton Forbes will be joining Coach Bill tomorrow night to discuss what happened to Malaysia 370, RSVP for 8 p.m. EST on the boardwalk. Then we'll kick it down a notch at our 5 p.m. I call it the Drive at 5 with Dr. Kate Wimley and Frank Gaffney and our friends from Sovereignty Coalition for our Stop the Who Wednesday, the Who update. That'll be at 5 p.m. EST here on the boardwalk in Twitterville. Targeted Thursday will follow that. We'll be back at 8 p.m. EST at our usual time for MK Ultra Targeted Individual Litigation. Backschoice.com will be joining Coach Bill to discuss all that. That'll be Thursday night, 8 p.m. EST on the boardwalk. We'll be back then on Freedom Friday for our Freedom Council litigation on the vaccine injured, joined by the Mendenhall firm. And Mr. Mendenhall, known as the People's Lawyer, will be here to address this issue with us. And this also ties into our WHO stuff with anti-WHO, I should say, for Stop the WHO, sponsored by Sovereignty Coalition. Then we'll wrap up the weekend Saturday with our
Hello, please state your name after the tone, and Google Voice will try to connect you.
Daniela Chodson. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, my friend.
What is going on?
My friend. How's Daniela doing?
I don't know. She texted me last night at like 1 in the morning.
What was she texting you?
Some stupid like Facebook, Instagram video. This girl that has like makeup on her face and's like singing a song. It's fucking retarded.
She, yeah, I didn't tell her on the phone. Yeah, Elle and Sherry Nadell came over for like Passover one year to my parents' house.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She's always got such interesting things to say.
Sherry Nadell married a really nice guy. Really handsome guy.
Yeah, but they don't have any kids or anything, right?
Oh, she had a kid.
With the guy?
Yeah.
Oh. No, that's good news.
He's very good looking, too. It's crazy to me. She fucked black guys. I wasn't really into that.
She was always a fatty.
She was always thick. She would go up and down, you know?
Whatever. She's a troll. She ain't nothing special.
Yeah.
The funniest thing is like Daniela and her would go to the Playboy Mansion for Halloween parties.
Yeah.
And you'd have to submit your photos. Yeah. And so Sherry would have to submit multiple packages to try to get accepted.
Daniela would just send a naked picture and they'd accept her.
Yeah. That bitch went there one time with
you probably have like 5,000 pictures of her.
Yeah, I got videos of me banging her.
That must be so embarrassing for her. That's probably why she can't get married, because she knows you're going to send the guy the videos.
No, are you kidding me? I don't even know. Like, I'd have to spend time to find him. I'm not going to waste my time. I could care less. Why would I want to ruin her marriage if she gets married? It's ridiculous.
Dude, you're John Kidover, man. You'll figure out a reason.
I mean, it'd be nice to blackmail her, but I don't think that's going to fly. So, I mean, what's the point? I mean, so what? I got laid. Wowee. I could go to the strip club on Friday, Saturday night, pay some incredibly hot escort, $1,000 to bang me, but like, I don't want to do that.
It's crazy, huh? She likes the black.
I swear, like when the whole Black Lives Matter movement thing happened, I think women like went to town. There must have been like a time where women in America were like, "Oh, get me that big black dick. I'm gonna fuck a big black dick." Like every chick wanted to try a black guy out or something.
Yeah. I think that's still going on with the internet.
It's still going on, but like after a while they wise up and they go, "Oh shit, like this shit ain't kosher and this guy's a piece of shit." Like fuck this shit.
You ever fuck a black chick? I've never done that.
Oh yeah, multiple.
Yuck.
Oh, don't knock it till you try it.
That good, huh?
It's just different, like, because, it's not like you're going to marry her. It's like you just want to have some fun on a Friday night and have some variety.
Be careful, they're going to steal your Basquiat.
I don't think so.
Your Basquiat.
I just hung up a ton of new paintings and framed pictures today.
You selling any of them?
No, none of them are for sale. I'm just like decorating my house. Like every wall is totally covered.
Yeah. All right. I will talk to you soon.
Okay, Rabbi Shalom. Take care.
Yeah, bye-bye.
it through the military. There's all kinds of different aspects of his career that's just very fishy. So we are required by law to give them a ride to wherever they go when they need military airlift. We're required to provide sea lift capability to them. So the way it was envisioned is that if they're doing something immoral or illegal, that somebody's going to go, I'm not doing that shit. But unfortunately, that hasn't worked out as well as some people thought it would.
I want to go down to Jeff.
This has been going on for a very long time, and it all has to be exposed.
Absolutely.
Eternal companion, help us pour out our hearts to you, honestly and sincerely, with these prayers as our guide. The golden sayings of Epictetus. Are these the only works of providence in us? What words suffice to praise or set them forth? Had we but understanding, should we ever cease hymning and blessing the divine power, both openly and in secret, and telling of his gracious gifts? Whether or plowing or eating, should we not sing the hymn to God? Great is God, for that he hath instruments to till the ground withal. Great is God, for that he hath given us hands, and the power of swallowing and digesting, of unconsciously growing and breathing while we sleep. Thus should we ever have sung, yea, and this, the grandest and divinest hymn of all. Great is God, for that he hath given us a mind to apprehend these things, and duly to use them. What then? Seeing that most of you are blinded, should there not be some one to fill this place, and sing the hymn to God on behalf of all men? What else can I, that am old and lame, do but sing to God? Were I a nightingale, I should do after the manner of a nightingale. Were I a swan, I should do after the manner of a swan. But now, since I am a reasonable being, I must sing to God. That is my work, I do it, nor will I desert this my post, as long as it is granted me to hold it. And upon you, too, I call to join in this self-same hymn. How then do men act? As though one returning to his country, who had sojourned for the night in a fair inn, should be so captivated thereby as to take up his abode there. Friend, thou hast forgotten thine intention. This was not thy destination, but only lay on the way thither. Nay, but it is a proper place, and how many more of the sort there be, only to pass through upon thy way. Thy purpose was to return to thy country, to relieve the kinsman's fears for thee, thyself to discharge the duties of a citizen, to marry a wife, to beget offspring, and to fill the appointed round of office. Thou didst not come to choose out what places are most pleasant, but rather to return to that wherein thou wast born, and where thou wert appointed to be a citizen. Try to enjoy the great festival of life with other men. But I have one whom I must please, to whom I must be subject, whom I must obey, God, and those who come next to him. He hath entrusted me with myself, he hath made my will subject to myself alone, and given me rules for the right use thereof. Rufus used to say, if you have leisure to praise me, what I say is not. In truth, he spoke in such wise that each of us who sat there thought that someone had accused him to Rufus so surely. Did he lay his finger on the very deeds we did, so surely display the faults of each before his very eyes? But what saith God? Had it been possible, Epictetus, I would have made both that body of thine and thy possessions free and unimpeded, but as it is, be not deceived. It is not thine own. It is but finely tempered clay. Since then this I could not do. I have given thee a portion of myself and the power of desiring, declining, and pursuing, and avoiding. In a word, the power of dealing with the things of sense. And if thou neglect not this, but place all that thou hast therein, thou shalt never be let or hindered, thou shalt never lament, thou shalt not blame or flatter any. What then seemeth this to thee a little thing, God forbid, be content then therewith, and so I pray the gods. What saith Antisthenes, hast thou never heard? It is a kingly thing, Osiris, to do well and to be evil spoken of. I, but to debase myself thus were unworthy of me. That said, Epictetus, is for you to consider, not for me. You know yourself what you are worth in your own eyes, and at what price you will sell yourself, for men sell themselves at various prices. This was why, when Florus was deliberating whether he should appear at Nero's shows, taking part in the performance himself, Agrippinus replied, appear by all means. And when Florus inquired, but why do not you appear? He answered, because I do not even consider the question. For the man who has once stooped to consider such questions, to reckon up the value of external things, is not far from forgetting what manner of man he is. Why, what is it that you ask me? Is death preferable or life? I reply life. Pain or pleasure? I reply pleasure. Well, but if I do not act, I shall lose my head. Then go and act, but for my part I will not act. Why? Because you think yourself but one among the many threads which make up the texture of the doublet. You should aim at being like men in general, just as your thread has no ambition either to be anything distinguished compared with the other threads. But I desire to be the pebble, that small and shining part, which makes the rest seem fair and beautiful. Why then do you bid me become even as the multitude? Then were I no longer the purple. If a man could be thoroughly penetrated as he ought with this thought that we are all in an especial manner sprung from God, and that God is the Father of men as well as of gods, full surely he would never conceive aught ignoble or base of himself, whereas if Caesar were to adopt you, your haughty looks would be intolerable. Will you not be elated at knowing that you are the Son of God? Now, however, it is not so with us, but seeing that in our birth these two things are commingled, the body which we share with the animals, and the reason and thought which we share with the gods. Many decline towards this unhappy kinship with the dead, few rise to the blessed kinship with the divine. Since then every one must deal with each thing according to the view which he forms about it. Those few who hold that they are born for fidelity, modesty, and unerring sureness in dealing with the things of sense, never conceive aught base or ignoble of themselves, but the multitude the contrary. Why, what am I, a wretched human creature with this miserable flesh of mine? Miserable indeed, but you have something better than the paltry flesh of yours. Why then cling to the one and neglect the other? Thou art but a poor soul laden with a lifeless body. The other day I had an iron lamp placed beside my household gods. I heard a noise at the door, and hastening down found my lamp carried off. I reflected that the culprit was in no very strange case. Tomorrow, my friend, I said, you will find an earthenware lamp, for a man can only lose what he has. The reason why I lost my lamp was that the thief was superior to me in vigilance. He paid, however, this price for the lamp, that in exchange for it he hastened to become a thief, in exchange for it to become faithless. If we were as intent upon our own business as the old fellows at Rome are upon what interests them, we too might perhaps accomplish something. I know a man older than I am, now superintendent of the corn market at Rome. and remember when he passed through this place on his way back from exile, what an account he gave me of his former life, declaring that for future, once home again, his only care should be to pass his remaining years in quiet and tranquility. For how few years have I laughed, he cried, that I said you will not do. But the moment the scent of Rome is in your nostrils, you will forget it all, and if you can but gain admission to court, you'll be glad enough to elbow your way in and thank God for it. Epictetus, he replied, if you ever find me setting as much as 1 foot within the court, think what you will of me. Well, as it was, what did he do ere ever he entered the city? He was met by a dispatch from the emperor. He took it and forgot the whole of his resolutions. From that moment he has been piling one thing upon another. I should like to be beside him to remind him of what he said when passing this way, and to add how much better a prophet I am than you. What then? Do I say man is not made for an active life? Far from it, but there is a great difference between other men's occupations and ours. A glance at theirs will make it clear to you all day long they do nothing but calculate, contrive, consult how to wring their profit out of foodstuffs, farm plots, and the like. Whereas I entreat you to learn what the administration of the world is, and what place it being endowed with reason holds therein, to consider what you are yourself, and wherein your good and evil consists. A man asked me to write to Rome on his behalf, who, as most people thought, had met with misfortune, for having been before wealthy and distinguished, he had afterwards lost all and was living here. So I wrote about him in a humble style. He, however, on reading the letter, returned it to me with the words, I asked for your help, not for your pity. No evil has happened unto me. True instruction is this, to learn to wish that each thing should come to pass as it does. And how does it come to pass? As the disposer has disposed it. Now he has disposed that there should be summer and winter, plenty and dearth, and vice and virtue, and all such opposites for the harmony of the whole. Have this thought ever present with thee, when thou losest any outward thing, what thou gainest in its stead. And if this be the more precious, say not, I have suffered loss. Concerning the gods, there are who deny the very existence of the Godhead. Others say that it exists, but neither bestows nor concerns itself, nor has forethought for anything. Third party attribute to it existence and forethought, but only for great and heavenly matters, not for anything that is on earth. A fourth party admit things on earth as well as in heaven, but only in general, and not with respect to each individual. A fifth of whom were Ulysses and Socrates, are those that cry, I move not without thy knowledge. Considering all these things, the good and true man submits his judgment to him that administers the universe, even as good citizens, to the law of the state. And he that is being instructed should come thus minded, how may I in all things follow the gods? And how may I satisfied with the divine administration? And how may I become free? For he is free for whom all things come to pass, according to his will, and whom none can hinder. What then is freedom? Madness? God forbid, for madness and freedom exist not together. And I wish all that I desire to come to pass, and in the manner that I desire. You are mad, you are beside yourself. Know you not that freedom is a glorious thing and of great worth? But that what I desired at random, I should wish at random to come to pass, so far from being noble, may well be exceeding base. You must know that it is no easy thing for a principle to become a man's own, unless each day he maintained it, and here it maintained, as well as work it out in life. You are impatient and hard to please. If alone you call it solitude, if in the company of men you dub them conspirators and thieves, and find fault with your very parents, children, brothers, and neighbors, whereas when by yourself you should have called it tranquility and freedom, and herein deemed yourself like unto the gods. And when in the company of the many you should not have called it a wearisome crowd and tumult, but an assembly and a tribunal, and thus accepted all with contentment. What then is the chastisement of those who accept it? Not to be as they are. Is any discontented with being alone? Let him be in solitude. Is any discontented with his parents? Let him be a bad son and lament. Is any discontented with his children? Let him be a bad father. Throw him into prison. What prison? Where he is already for he is there against his will, and wherever a man is against his will, there to him is a prison. Thus Socrates was not in prison, since he was there with his own consent. Knowing thou what a speck thou art in comparison with the universe, that is, with respect to the body, since with respect to reason thou art not inferior to the gods, no less than they. For the greatness of reason is not measured by length or height, but by the resolves of the mind. Place then thy happiness in that wherein thou art equal to the gods. Asked how a man might eat acceptably to the gods, Epictetus replied, if when he eats he can be just, cheerful, equable, temperate, and orderly, can he not thus eat acceptably to the gods? But when you call for warm water and your slave does not answer, or when he answers brings it lukewarm, or is not even found to be in the house at all, then not to be vexed nor burst with anger, is not that acceptable to the gods? But how can one endure such people? Slave, will you not endure your own brother, that has God to his forefather, even as a son sprung from the same stock, and of the same high descent as yourself? And if you are stationed in a high position, are you therefore forthwith to set up for a tyrant? Remember who you are and whom you rule, that they are by nature your kinsmen, your brothers, the offspring of God. But I paid a price for them, not they for me. Do you see whither you are looking down to the earth, to the pie, to the pit, to those despicable laws of the dead? But to the laws of the gods you do not look. When we are invited to a banquet, we take what is set before us, and were one to call upon his host to set fish upon the table or sweet things, he would be deemed absurd. Yet in a word, we ask the gods for what they do not give, and that although they have given us so many things, asked how a man might convince himself that every single act of this was under the eye of God, Epictetus answered, do you not hold that all things are bound together in one? I do. Well, and do you not hold that things on earth and things in heaven are continuous and in unison with each other? I do, was the reply. Else how should the trees so regularly, as though by God's command, at his bidding flower, at his bidding send forth shoots, bear fruit and ripen it, at his bidding let it fall and shed their leaves, folded up upon themselves lie in quietness and rest? How else, as the moon waxes and wanes, as the sun approaches and recedes, can it be that such vicissitude and alternation is seen in earthly things? If then all things that grow, nay, our own bodies are thus bound up with the whole, is it not this still truer of the souls? And if our souls are bound up and in contact with God as being very parts and fragments plucked from himself, shall he not feel every movement of theirs as though it were his own, and belonging to his own nature? But you say, I cannot comprehend all this at once. Why, who told you that your powers were equal to God's? Yet God hath placed by the side of each a man's own guardian spirit. To the Stoics, the guardian spirit was each man's reason, who is charged to watch over him, a guardian who sleeps nor is deceived. For to what better or more watchful guardian could he have committed each of us? So when you have shut the doors and made a darkness within, remember never to say that you are alone, for you are not alone, but God is within, and your guardian spirit. What light do they need to behold what you